The incident took place in 1998. At that time the accommodation of students in the madrasah was not so good. Some students of the madrasah used to sleep in the mosque with the priest of the mosque Mr. Rizal at night. On the day of the incident, around 12 o'clock at night, someone knocked on the door of the mosque.
Mr. Rizal, open the door.
Mr. Rizal opened the door and saw his neighbor.
Mr. Rizal, one of my relatives died. You go a little, he has to bury her before dawn.
You mean before dawn? Why so early?
You will understand the matter as soon as you go.
What else to do? His job is to benefit people. Then Mr. Rizal left with the man. After 5 to 10 minutes walk, when he reached there, he saw that every door and window of their house was closed. Mr. Rizal thought, what's the matter? There should be a lot of people in the dead house, but only 3 people here. And there were 4 chairs in the yard. Mr. Rizal thought, maybe he was brought here to kill him or to do any harm. Because at that time there was a lot of trouble regarding the land issue of the madrasah. And the land of madrasah was Mr. Rizal's family. With this in mind, Mr. Rizal will turn and run. Just then one of the 3 of them said,
Mr. Rizal, you have no reason to be afraid. You come here and see the body, then you will understand the matter.
Mr. Rizal was a little relieved. Mr. Rizal saw the body lying on a table on the veranda of the house and covered his face with a white cloth.
Mr. Rizal, we have to arrange to bathe the corpse.
As soon as Mr. Rizal removed the cloth from the corpse, his eyes filled with fear and surprise. He was not at all prepared to see such a terrible and tragic scene. The face of the corpse is no longer like a man's face. It took the form of a pig's mouth. Mr. Rizal takes a step back and says,
It is not possible for me to bathe this body.
Mr. Rizal, that's why we sent the women and boys of the house away. Because they will be scared when they see this body, and that's why we want to bury the body before dawn, because in the morning if people find out that the face of the corpse is distorted, then everyone will come to see.
No matter how bad he is, we should arrange for his proper burial. It would be great if you could help us a little bit.
Then Mr. Rizal agreed to their words. After bathing the body, then a white shroud was put on. Then Mr. Rizal said,
Let's go to the graveyard, perform janazah there, then bury him.
The cemetery was at Lokht village, about half a kilometer east of the Rajbari district headquarters. Most of the land in the village is government property. Different types of trees have created forests in the area. After going to the cemetery, first Mr. Rizal went to visit the new tomb. When he saw the tomb, he rebuked those who had dug it and said,
You two have dug a good grave long ago. You should know what the size of the grave should be, but why did you cut the grave so small? Is it a child's grave? It looks like the grave of a 2 or 4-year-old child.
Then one of the grave diggers said,
Sir, you look at the ground above the grave, see here is a mound of soil.
What actually happened? Tell me a little more.
We have dug graves of exactly the same size, but when we climbed to the top after digging the tomb, suddenly the tomb became smaller. Then we dig the grave again. But again, the tomb was as small as before. We have dug graves more than once, but the same scene every time. We are tired and it is no longer possible for us to dig graves.
Now Mr. Rizal himself went down and started digging the grave. After digging the grave, he got up from the grave. But the grave is not getting smaller like before. Everyone was a little relieved. This time the janazah of the body was completed. But after the janazah, Everyone came to the grave and fell into a little embarrassing situation, because the tomb has become smaller again. It was not possible to keep the body inside the grave as the size of the grave was not correct. As a result, Mr. Rizal folded the body's knees and placed them inside the grave. Bamboo slices are first laid on top of the grave. As soon as a mat was laid after laying the bash, suddenly a strange sound came from inside the grave to everyone's ears. Whenever the people above the tomb heard this sound, at the same time, everyone ran all the way with their strength and moved far away. Mr. Rizal thought that if he got scared now, then the burial work would be incomplete. Then he said to everyone,
"In fact, at night, we may have heard something wrong. Let's all go and finish the burial."
Everyone got a little courage at the words of Mr. Rizal and they all finished the work of burial very quickly. Subsequently, Mr. Rizal found out that the face of the corpse was distorted. That man practiced a lot of black magic and different people from different places would come to him and he would do the work in exchange for money. His 2 sons died at an early age and later his wife also died. He continued to work black magic until his death.